Hello, everyone. In this video, we will talk about Marxism as a literary theory, or what is called Marxist criticism. Let's start with the co-founders of this theory. Karl Marx, who was born in 1818 and passed away in 1883, and Friedrich Engels, 1820 to 1895. They were primarily concerned with economic, political, and philosophical issues and worked out explanations of the capitalist theory and mode of production. They did not develop an aesthetic of culture or literature, although they did say quite traditional things about Greek art, which suggests that Marx himself believed in the relative autonomy of art, as Marx's introduction to the Critique of Political Economy, 1875, and Hans Robert Jauss's article in New Literary History, titled The Idealist Embarrassment. However, Marxist principles, attitudes, and modes of thought and inquiry have been adapted to create a Marxist theory of literature, what it has been, and what it might and perhaps should be. The Marxist critic, who tends to be primarily interested in content, writes from the definite standpoint of Marx's philosophical ideas, and from his view of history, in which the class struggle is fundamental, or in terms of socio-historical factors. Much earlier, Marxist criticism has been devoted to a reconstruction of the past based on historical evidence in order to find out to what extent a text, say a novel, is a truthful and accurate representation of social reality at any given time. As Trotsky suggested in Literature and Revolution, 1924, artistic creation is a changing and a transformation of reality in accordance with the peculiar laws of art. The concept of socialist realism marked an important advance in the development of Marxist and, ipso facto, communist views on literature and art in general. Socialist realism required a writer, or any artist, to be committed to the working-class cause of the party, and it required that literature should be progressive and should display a progressive outlook on society. This necessitated forms of optimism and realism. Moreover, doctrine demanded that literature should be accessible to the masses. This was particularly true of the novel. Now let's talk about some of the main figures in Marxism. A key figure is the first major Marxist critic, the Hungarian Georg Lukács, 1885 to 1971. He developed the critical theory of reflection, seeing literary works as reflections of a kind of system that was gradually unfolding. In his view, the novel, for instance, and he had much to say about this genre. The Frankfurt School of Marxist Aesthetics is associated with the Institute of Social Research, founded in 1923, and affiliated to the University of Frankfurt. During the Nazi period, it was exiled, 1933, to New York, from where it returned to Frankfurt in 1949 to 50. This school, whose chief spirits were Theodor Adorno, Max Horkheimer, and Herbert Marcuse, rejected realism more or less completely and developed what is known as critical theory. They were much influenced by A, their experience of a totalitarian regime and fascism, and B, their experience of American mass culture, capitalism, and commercialism. Both the Nazi and American societies were regarded as one-dimensional. Adorno advanced the theory that literature does not have direct contact with reality. He favored modernism in literature because it is distanced from the reality it seeks to describe, and this distancing enhances its critical reality. Thus, knowledge of reality is achieved indirectly or obliquely. Horkheimer was in favor of avant-garde and modernism because they are hostile to passivity, acquiescence, and submission to the political and artistic status quo, and thus to any form of inhibitive or repressive ideology. Marcuse suggests that the autonomous work of art embodies one form of subversion in a repressive society. Walter Benjamin, for a while associated with Adorno, took a contrary view to him. He surveyed the importance of technology in art and books in urban and industrialized society, and also the enormous development of the media. As a Marxist, he was interested in mass culture and in the way in which culture is packaged and consumed by the masses. In his view, the media, in close contact with reality, have the power to eliminate the ritual and bourgeois elitism of art and literature and give it a kind of political freedom. He is more concerned with technique and with artistic forces at work than with the correct position of art and literature socially and economically. So, the emphasis is on the relation of a work of art to the ever-changing conditions of the production of art itself. The French Marxist philosopher Louis Althusser, 1918 to 90, developed a theory of different levels within the social formation and argued that these levels possess no overall unity. They have a relative autonomy, a concept developed by Marxists to account for Marx's view that ancient Greek art was enduringly attractive. He proposed ideological state apparatuses, ISAs, institutions, schools, media, literature, that reinforce class structures. He argues that literature not only reflects ideology, but also helps construct it. In his book The Hidden God, 1964, the Romanian critic Lucian Goldman developed a theory of homologies, or structural parallels between literature, ideas, and social groups. He saw literary texts as emerging from trans-individual mental structures, which belong to groups or classes. Next, we have the French Marxist Pierre Macherey, a follower of Althusser, in A Theory of Literary Production, 1966. He advances the idea that a literary text distances itself from its ideology by virtue of its form and its fiction, and also by the silences or gaps in the text, by what is not said. These silences, gaps, he contends, not only conceal but also expose ideological contradictions. Such absences are suppressions, so to speak, within the text of its own unconscious. Marxist criticism in Britain has not flourished to the extent it has elsewhere. One influential British Marxist critic has been Raymond Williams, 1921 to 88, who attempted a historical assessment of culture and literature in Marxist terms. He developed cultural materialism, which studies literature as part of a broader historical process. He emphasized the importance of structures of feeling, how social change influences artistic expression. The principal theorist of Marxist criticism in Britain is Terry Eagleton, who, developing certain views of Althusser and Macherey, suggests that a basic problem is to make clear the relationship between literature and ideology. In his view, texts do not reflect reality, but influence an ideology to produce the effect or impression of reality. Now, let's move to the leading exponent of Marxist criticism in America is Frederick Jameson, who makes eclectic use of a range of theories, including structuralism, deconstruction, archetypal criticism, allegorical interpretation, and Jacques Lacan's interpretations, or reinterpretations, of Freud, any or all of which he may find useful in the critical interpretation of a literary text. It is his contention that Marxism subsumes other interpretative modes when it comes to a political interpretation which exposes the political unconscious of a text. Like Macherey, he is concerned with the subtext, but more specifically with that subtext which historically and ideologically constitutes the unspoken, the concealed and suppressed. Thus, a Marxist interpretation looks for levels of meaning in the mode of allegory. A more recent Marxist voice has been that of the Slovenian philosopher Slavoj Zizek, who has engaged in a reading of Hegelian dialectics in the light of Lacanian categories in order to undertake a renewed critique of capitalism. Let's not forget the Italian Marxist philosopher Antonio Gramsci, who is best known for his theory of cultural hegemony. He explains hegemony as the ruling classes that maintain power through cultural and ideological dominance. He adds that literature can either reinforce or resist this control. After we talked about the main Marxist figures and their ideas, let's start with the key concepts. First-class struggle. Literature reflects and reinforces the ongoing conflict between the bourgeoisie, ruling class, and the proletariat, working class. 2. Base and superstructure. Base. The economic foundation, means of production, labor, capital. Superstructure, institutions like politics, law, religion, and literature that arise from the base. Literature is shaped by economic forces, but can also influence them. 3. Ideology and false consciousness. Ideology, the dominant beliefs and values of a society, often benefiting the ruling class. False consciousness, when people accept the status quo as natural, even when it oppresses them. Literature can reinforce or challenge these ideologies. 4. Reification and alienation. Lukács, Marx. Reification, treating human relationships as market commodities. Alienation, when workers feel disconnected from their labor and society. Literature often portrays alienation, particularly in capitalist settings. Fifth Hegemony, by Antonio Gramsci. Power is maintained not only through force, but through cultural dominance. Literature, education, and media shape public consciousness in favor of the ruling class. Sixth reflection, theory versus relative autonomy, reflection theory. Literature directly reflects the economic and social conditions of its time. Relative autonomy, Althusser. Literature has some independence and can challenge dominant ideologies. 7. Analyzing the form of a work beyond content. The form, narrative style, genre, structure, reflects historical material conditions. Realism versus modernism. Georg Lukács praised realism for depicting class struggle clearly, while modernist techniques, stream of consciousness, fragmentation, were criticized for being detached from political concerns. Now, to apply Marxist criticism to literature, you need to check the following issues and address the questions that this video provides. First, examining class struggle. Ask these questions. Who holds power? Who is oppressed? 2. Identifying ideology and hegemony. How does the text reinforce or challenge dominant beliefs? 3. Investigating economic conditions. How do material conditions shape the characters and narrative? 4th, analyzing alienation and reification. Are characters treated as objects or commodities? 5. Studying the form of the work. Does the structure reflect economic or political realities? To recap, Marxist literary criticism helps uncover the hidden economic and ideological structures in literature. By analyzing class struggle, ideology, economic conditions, and literary form, we can better understand how literature reflects and influences society. If you find this video helpful, don't forget to subscribe, like, and share it with those who are interested. Thank you. See you in the next video.